Welcome to your Bitcoin marketing block. This is episode 14, the role of PR in narrative control and crisis management. If you think about, how people have experienced Bitcoin, not just people in the community, but people everywhere, the masses, most have not experienced it directly, right? Most have, their knowledge, their understanding of Bitcoin comes from stories, right? It's stories that they hear on the news. It's what they see in headlines and on television and on YouTube and through podcasts and on social media and conversations, right? It's all stories. People haven't read the white paper. People don't run nodes. It's their understanding is based on, these narratives that are out there. And that makes, narrative one of the most important things about Bitcoin and where it is today.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think like when you hear about people's origin stories, it has so much to do with the people that help them understand it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, Bitcoin being decentralized, as you said, there's no marketing department. There's nobody who's meeting to figure out how to shape perception, publicly. And so no person or group of people kind of own the narrative, right? But we know that people try. There's been examples of people trying to co-opt, the brand and so forth. But that entire model, that decentralized model, is just unfamiliar to most people. So it's interesting because it's like you look at the decentralization, which I would say most people would agree is one of Bitcoin's greatest strengths. It's something that's so core to what it is the technology. But at the same time, it presents this challenge that needs to be
Yeah.
overcome in the short term.
Right. And that challenge has led to the reality that if you don't shape the narrative, somebody else will. Right. And that's exactly what we've seen with Bitcoin is that every day you've got journalists, you've got politicians, economists, influencers, all these people that have really no true understanding of what Bitcoin actually is, they're defining it for millions of people around the world. And if the Bitcoin community and the Bitcoin ecosystem isn't actively participating in those conversations, then it loses the opportunity to provide context or balance. And that really is where public relations come in, right? Because PR should be both proactive and reactive. I think when most people think about public relations, they think about the reactive side, right? That it only matters during a communications crisis.
Mhm.
But really strong PR is about consistently creating positive stories even before a crisis occurs. So it could be, stories about business adoption, use cases, the humanitarian impact, innovation. Like the point is that a steady stream of positive narratives is what builds credibility over time. So that when you do have a crisis that happens, then that credibility that's been built that lends to trust, that trust becomes your currency.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think too, the unfortunate part for Bitcoin is it's almost been the opposite, right? If we think about what have been those big headline events that are grabbing public attention, in the early days, it was the Silk Road exchange. You could buy and sell drugs, other illicit substances, or things, primarily enabled through Bitcoin, right? There was the collapse of Mount Gox, all these people losing their money and so forth, and making the technology seem, you know, really immature. We had FTX with SBF. And even most recently, one of the stories that's making a lot of headlines is Iran is accepting Bitcoin for payments to let ships through the Strait of Hormuz. And so your average person who's not going to dedicate the time necessary to really understand what Bitcoin is and to look at these different perspectives and different sources of information, they're going to paint it with that brush of, hey, here's this terrible thing that happened. People lost money, criminals, drugs, so forth. And right
Right.
there, they've just associated that with Bitcoin.
Yeah. And, a lot of marketers will understand that these narratives have a snowball effect. Like a strong narrative will compound just like an investment. And when these negative narratives have dominated, the headlines for years, there's been that snowball effect. And that's why, for the most part, understanding of Bitcoin is where it is today. One positive story will not change public opinion, right? But if you have hundreds of stories over many, many years, then it's going to start to shift how society thinks.
Mm.
And that's what's been missing. And we've on our episodes we've talked a lot about marketing, but specifically through an advertising lens. I think PR is just as important as advertising because they play different roles. Like with advertising, you're paying to say something about yourself. With PR, you've got trusted third parties saying things about you, and both influence perception, but it's that earned media side that often carries greater credibility because it comes through independent voices.
Mm.
And when you want your paid media to have more of an impact, it that happens when there's also earned media happening alongside of it. So the goal, at the end of the day, the goal is not to eliminate criticism of Bitcoin, it's to create balance, right? Like every major industry has critics. The objective isn't to silence those negative stories or pretend that those, other challenges don't exist. It's to ensure that the public also hears the stories of innovation and adoption, resilience, and real world impact so that they can form their own opinions.